I've got to admit, this is one of my favorite MCU movies of all time. Not only that, but one of my favorite movies in general. Going back and revisiting it, it still holds up, especially from a narrative perspective. That being said, this movie certainly isn't perfect. It has its issues, and they become even more evident over time. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and tell a friend if you haven't. And if you're new here, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Captain America Civil War. I think the aspect of this film that always impresses me the most is how, even though it's jam-packed with numerous characters, new and old, involves multiple plot threads, and boasts a few giant action sequences with plenty of heroes involved, it always still feels like this is Captain America's movie. With a different writing or directing team, this movie could have gone off the rails and could have transformed, for worse, in my opinion, into just an Avengers film. And I know there are people out there who refer to Civil War as Avengers 2.5, but I never thought of it like that. And I certainly don't feel that even upon rewatch. In fact, I think designating it with this moniker is a little disrespectful toward what this movie accomplishes. Let me just get the gripes out of the way first, because all in all, I believe this film fully deserves all of the praise that it has gotten since its release, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on the negatives. This movie belongs to an era of MCU films that are visually sort of bland. For whatever reasons, the producers, directors, etc. decided it would be a good idea to turn down the color grading and mute everything, and visually it leaves a lot to be desired. This is a franchise that tells bombastic, galaxy-wide superhero stories, and it should look and feel like that. And sometimes, this movie, along with some of the other ones around this time, just don't. Zemo is a great villain. His motivation is relatable and understandable. You empathize with his desires. And he is just a man. Sure, a highly trained man, but a man nonetheless, who brings down the Avengers. That being said, this movie does rely on a few coincidences to help bring his plan to fruition. For instance, he relies on the housekeeper finding the dead doctor's body, and that news hitting the airwaves at the exact same time as Cap and Bucky are infiltrating the Russian base, and the exact same time that Tony is on his way to see Ross and our captured heroes, bringing the two men together right in front of Zemo to drive the final nail into the coffin. It's a bit silly, but if you're able to ignore these little details, it really is an epic villain. What he does to our heroes, mainly Cap and Tony, is incredible. And lastly, the forced Cap and Sharon romance is terrible. Just stop. The MCU has really only succeeded at like 3, maybe 4 of these. It really is not their strongest attribute. Now, outside of those few pretty minor grievances, I think everything else in this movie is near perfect. The performances are top notch. Every performer involved brings their absolute A game. Even actors like Martin Freeman and William Hurt, who are only really in a handful of scenes each, could have phoned it in for a good paycheck, but they didn't. And all the newbies are just perfectly cast. Daniel Bruhl is excellent as Zemo, seemingly a normal man, but underneath, buried under that calm, calculated demeanor, is a wolf. A killer willing to do anything necessary to enact vengeance for the pain that he has suffered. Tom Holland, in my opinion, Tom Holland is the best live-action Spider-Man. He is perfect for this role. It was so refreshing for Peter Parker to finally look and sound like a teenager, not a 30 to 35-year-old man. He plays off all of the heroes so well, dropping jokes, quips, and references left and right. He feels like Spider-Man, not to mention the fact that Holland is naturally gifted in acrobatics, which brings an element of realism to all of his fight scenes. And that suit, I know some people don't like it, but I think that suit is fantastic. The same can be said about T'Challa. Boseman, rest in peace, is very good as Black Panther. He's sort of the mirror to Zemo, which is great. In the third act, when the men finally come face to face, T'Challa sees so much of the same hurt in Zemo's face that he feels. He realizes that these two men aren't so different, that he's becoming the very man that he's been chasing this entire movie, and he alters his course of action because of it. And his suit as well is incredible. I know that since then the Black Panther suit has had different features added to it. It's become way more CGI looking, and I don't love it. This original one from Civil War, I think, is a beautiful suit. The action set pieces that are showcased in this film are some of the best in the MCU. The opening pursuit and capture of Rumlow is electric. The Bucharest chase sequence is so well choreographed and diverse. That airport fight, I mean, it has been talked to death. It legitimately is something out of a comic book centerfold. It is epic. And my god, the Tony vs. Cap and Bucky face-off is gut-wrenching. Which brings me to the best aspect of this film. The emotional core of this movie is so insanely compelling. Civil War is one of the most, if not the most, emotionally resonant films in this franchise. And it is due to three things, I believe. Very good writing, Robert Downey Jr., and Chris Evans. The story that Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely crafted for this narrative works so well. Yes, this movie is about mistakes, revenge, consequences, government oversight, but at its very core, it is a movie about the complicated, intricate fabric of friendships and how we navigate them. Cap sees Bucky as the only family from his original life that he has left. He understands the threat that Bucky presents society, but he will do anything in his power to fight for him, to protect him. He believes wholeheartedly in the good in Bucky, in the good in all people. And then there's Cap and Tony's relationship. Over the couple Avengers films that came before this, they've become close allies. They've become more than just co-leaders of the Avengers. They've become brothers in arms, willing to die for one another on the battlefield. Both men believe in the other. Both men share a deep admiration and respect for one another, even though they might not always see eye to eye, which is even more apparent through the events of this film. We see these close friendships thrown into chaos from what starts as a simple disagreement, a dissent of opinions and values that each of these men hold close to them. Tony, uncharacteristically, sides with the government, and in turn the Accords, because he understands that even though they are heroes, they have themselves caused avoidable destruction because of their actions. He has seen what has come of these decisions, the lives that have been lost, and sees the correct course of action as accepting oversight. Cap, a man steadfast in his values, a man not easily shaken from his position but willing to hear the other side, can't help but stand opposite to Tony. Having walked this path before, Cap knows all too well the dangers and repercussions of affording bureaucratic governmental agencies too much power. It's this one thing that divides these men that call each other friends. Both men unwilling to yield their position to the other. In fact, this rift between them is a great example of why compromise is so important. We all have values, opinions, and positions that mean a great deal to us, and we should treasure those, but we should also know when to allow discourse. To know when to not let what we believe completely define who we are. Our experiences should determine our viewpoints, not the opposite. This movie exemplifies why compromise is so integral to a functioning relationship. And this all comes to a head in the final blow. The heartbreaking reveal of Bucky being responsible for the death of Tony's parents and Cap's knowledge of it. That he kept from Tony this secret all of these years. It's beautifully executed and unbelievably sad. And none of this could have worked without Downey or Evans. Both of these men, to this point in their careers as these respective heroes, they have fully embodied them. I know that inevitably these movies will be remade, these stories retold, and the characters recast, but for the time being, I couldn't see any other actor in these roles. Many will share that opinion when it comes to Downey. I mean, he was born for this role, but I feel as though Evans never quite gets the credit he's due. Cap, on paper, is sort of this boring, one-note character. He's stoic, unrelenting, and overly serious. He's a Boy Scout. He shouldn't be this interesting. It's a testament to Evans and his abilities for bringing a personality to this role. Every scene these men share in this film together, you feel every bit of their relationship. Something that goes beyond just good writing on a page, or actors reciting lines. These two men together sell this conflict. There's two lines that break me every time I rewatch this film. Two lines that are not only perfectly written, but perfectly translated by these actors, and both occur in the final fight between Cap and Tony. The first, Tony stands over Cap. Cap tells Tony Bucky is his friend, to which Tony responds, "So was I." The second, Cap grabs Bucky and his shield and makes his way out of the facility. Tony calls to him to drop the shield. He says, "It doesn't belong to you. You don't deserve it. My father made that shield." And Cap relents, dropping the shield and his title with it. Those two lines highlight the immense tragedy that this film presents. Look, I could go on and on about this movie all day. I truly love it, despite its flaws. Eventually, like I said, new actors are going to fill these shoes. The effects will become obsolete, and the story will be retooled, retold, and released for a younger audience. But what we got in Captain America Civil War, at its bones, is an engaging and relatable narrative about basic human interactions and conflict. And I think that mere fact of this movie will help it stand the test of time.